I am interviewing Jason Lee today. He's one of my good buddies. He just renovated this beautiful new house in Newton, Massachusetts, and he's done really well in real estate, so I wanted to do an interview today, pick his brain, and hopefully y'all can learn a little bit more about the real estate game. Come on in. Yeah. So, is Lisa happy with this house? Because I remember you always said she like kind of wonders what you're doing, and she doesn't feel like you're working.
Yes. Well, she's very happy with it. She doesn't want to move, even though I was like, hey, we can make a profit on it. And that's one of the things is we've been moving like every 3-4 years, because it's kind of like, it's called live and flip. So when you flip, you got to pay, capital gains taxes, short-term capital gains, which is at the highest level. But you live in it for 2 years, you don't have to pay any capital gains taxes. And so I'm like, okay, well, instead of flipping it, we can live in it and then move on to something a little bit bigger. And, but she's like, that's it. Like, this is the last one.
Yeah.
Which
it's a nice house to have as the last one.
Yeah. But I'm like, hey, you can always be nicer.
Yeah. And you can always make money, right?
Yeah. I mean, exactly. Even if you go something the same, if you make money, why are you going to say no to it? But I understand. And I think at a certain point, we talk about this as like, when I hit like my midlife crisis, it was like, okay, I got to slow down. And
when was this?
I haven't told you about this?
No.
I've told a lot of people.
Okay. Oh, well, the internet's going to know now.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's not like, for me, it was just, have I told you about my project before?
Which one, the mill?
Yeah. So that one, went bad. And so it was creeping up into that where I was kind of getting really tired with development, really tired with dealing with contractors. And that kind of was like, the last straw. So I was like, okay, I'm not gonna take on projects if I don't want to do it. Before, where I just took it on, I don't, just whatever it was to make a living, I took it.
Was it things that were too risky, or was just not worth it? Is that how you change your thinking?
I think, partially the risk, but mainly because I just didn't want to do the work. I wanted more passive, or I wanted to do work that I enjoyed. When you're dealing with construction, it's a headache. I mean, you've done a little bit with your restaurant.
Yeah.
But I've done so many, and there's so many bad contractors out there that, it kind of wears down you. Some people, love it. They, I have some friends that are developers that love to do it, and but for me, just dealing with some aspects of it is really draining.
Yeah. What are some of those aspects?
Oh, I've had contractors steal from me.
Like steal money, equipment, or?
Like they will ask for deposit, like let's say midway or in the early beginning of the project, usually midway. They're like, I'm like, you didn't really do that much. But they're like, oh, I just need one more deposit to go get supplies, and then they don't show up.
How much was that deposit?
So one time was $15,000. And then this house, I'm suing somebody on it. And he actually stopped showing up to finish the job. So, I'm suing him for, I think, like 60.
Damn.
So, yeah. And then I should have sued like 3 contractors down in Rhode Island for the mill, but I was just so tired of it. I just wanted to get it done, and then I sold it, and yeah.
So is it your wife making you slow down a little bit, or is it the midlife crisis?
No, I think it's me. It's
you.
I just was just like, okay. And this was part of our inner circle conversation when you were still in there too. In our group, was just that, at a certain point, you kind of want to do what you want to do, instead of just doing whatever it takes to make money, which in the beginning, I think you have to do what it takes to make money.
Yeah.
To grow. You can't be like, oh, you know, no offense to the starving artists out there, but I don't think that's a good avenue. You know, I think you can first make your money and then be comfortable and then go and be an artist.
Yeah.
Go and do what you want to do.
Right.
But you can't be the other way around, because the beginning is so important because of compound interest, right? Like if you think of it, let's say you get 30% return on your money. Every 3 years, your money doubles. So in the beginning, let's say you have $10,000 and it doubles. You're like, oh, okay, after 3 years, I make 10 grand, which is like, whatever, it's not that much. But that doubles between 20, 40, 80, 160, right? 320, and then 640. So at that point, now if you're doubling every 3 years and you're getting 320 on those 3 years, like that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
But if you start late, now you gotta,
with the lower amount, you're not compounding as much. Yeah.
Yes. So that's why I think like in the beginning it's so important to save.
Yeah.
And I felt like I did, you know, pretty well in that. You know, coming from like Asian parents, I don't know how your parents may
they're nice.
Are they too? Like my parents were super frugal. Like they didn't spend anything, and so you know, I kind of that's just kind of carried forward.
Yeah. So like you've basically gone from the point where you don't have to hustle as hard anymore, where you're more comfortable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So kind of like that's why I wanted to talk to you today, because I feel like everybody wants to get into real estate, right? And you're one of the few people that I think have been successful actually in it, you know? So what do you think has separated you, you know? And I think some of the hustle in the beginning was part of it, but what else was it? Or maybe that's where it starts.
I think, you know, it's actually very simple. People think that there's like a secret, but it's very simple. It's just you have to you have to increase your income, lower your expenses, and invest all of it.
And what did that look like for you in the beginning?
So let me just give you an example. Like when I was still in corporate, I remember I started off first job was $28,000 a year.
28,000.
28,000 a year right out of college.
Was it 1950s when you graduated?
Even when I was, you know, in my early 30s, you know, the last job I had was 60. So, and the whole entire time, I saved half my paycheck.
Wow.
So when I was making 28.
How did you do that? 28,000?
Well, I was 28. When I was right out of college, I lived at home.
Okay. What year was this?
2002.
Okay.
And then.
So you're living at home. That helps a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when I moved out.
You didn't go out?
I went out, you know, occasionally. You know, like once a week I went out.
You didn't go clubbing? You weren't part of that crowd?
I did, but I would drink before I go out to the bars, right?
Smart,
and then when I get to the bar, I just drink one drink.
Yeah.
But I remember, like, for example, I think I was like around 28, and, you know, we got an apartment with two other friends. So rent was $350 per person. I mean, this is a little while ago. It was an old apartment.
Yeah.
We just got a cheap one.
$350, yeah.
But then there was a front porch that was semi-heated, but it was like surrounded by windows, so it was freezing. And you know, I slept in there because we had a fourth roommate that wanted to move in.
Yeah.
And so I paid $150.
Okay.
So I saved $200. But I was freezing at night. But in my mind, I was just...
Oh, this is amazing. I never heard this story.
You haven't heard this one?
This is amazing, yeah.
Yeah, so I just did whatever it took to, you know, save money and then invest it. And, you know, when you think about that, like, oh, it's just $200 a month. But, like, that was a long time ago. You know, that would have, if that doubled every 3-4 years.
What were you investing in back then?
So then that's when I started buying real estate. Was when the market crashed in 2009.
2009. So you were saving money.
Yes.
Up until 2009.
Yes.
Where were you putting it, in stocks or just
like CDs.
CDs.
Because I had no idea, you know, I didn't know what to
You
do.
just knew you had to save.
Yeah. And that's like the same thing as my parents. Like they they don't spend, they put it on, you know, all the CDs or money market.
Yeah.
But they never had high income. So that was and they never invested. So you have to do all three.
They didn't get the compound. Yeah.
Yeah, but you have to do all three. Like, I'm sure we know people that make good money, but then they spend it all.
Yeah.
Maybe Tristan in his early days with the BMW.
Not anymore, yeah.
But, you know, if you do that, then you're left with nothing.
Yeah.
Right? Or people that, like my parents, who are great savers, but they don't make much. They're making like just above minimum wage. Even though you're saving, you know, or back when I was making 28,000, even though I save half my paycheck, it's not going to go anywhere.
Right.
So you have to have both, and then sure, we know some people that make good income and don't spend that much, but they just, you know, put it in a savings account.
Yeah. I love this
Or
point.
bonds.
Because I think like everybody thinks you need money to start a business, but the same thing happened to me too. Like my first food truck was $19,000.
Yeah.
It wasn't that much.
Yeah.
And I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with 5 people at the time. People were sleeping on the couches.
Wait, 5
everything.
people in a 2-bedroom?
Yeah. Well, we had
That's-
2 couples and someone living on the couch.
Okay, that's like more brutal than my situation.
No,
At
no,
least I
yours
had my
was
own-
worse. We had a nicer apartment.
But I had like my own room, somewhat.
Yeah.
Okay.
But back then, you know, I was saving like half my paycheck
Yeah.
because I knew I wanted to start this food truck.
Okay.
And we were able to do it. Same thing as you
Yeah.
know. So I think that's a really important point for people to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you have to do all three. You have to invest it well too, and you have to take calculated risk. So I think people think that, you know, us entrepreneurs, we're big risk takers, but I think we have to take calculated risks. Like, so
Yeah.
it's like we're seeking alpha. You know what I mean by alpha?
Yeah.
So, of course, something has some risk. I mean, even if you're working in corporate, you could get fired
Yeah.
or laid off.
In a way, that's very risky, yeah.
There's some risk in that too. Of course, I think entrepreneurship will have a little bit more risk than if you worked in a 9 to 5. But it's not. I mean, some things maybe opening a restaurant is highly risky, but investing in real estate at that time, I was just like, this is not that. I don't think this is going to be that
This was
risky.
back in 2009. So
Yeah.
Okay.
And I went full time, I think 2012. So I was working, and then I was also going to grad school for my master's in finance. And then I was like, screw this, screw this job,
That was
right?
2012. What was?
I think it was around,
But in 2009, did you buy a house when the market crashed? Like, what was that?
Yeah,
first
I
purchase?
bought a condo for myself to live in, and then I started buying condos in Dorchester, which was like dirt cheap.
in cash.
Yeah.
So you had saved up enough.
I had a little bit of help from my family, but yes, it was like kind of me and my family.
You didn't have a mortgage, just cash, straight cash on these.
It was 60,000
$60,000.
for a condo.
Wow.
3-bedroom condos were going 60, but this was like the worst part of Dorchester.
Yeah.
So, but I was like, there's no way. Like this is such a good deal,
There's only a way but up, yeah.
But nobody else was buying it. I remember when I was buying. This is like I feel like I was so naive back then, but I bought one, the first one I bought, and then this other investor had the other 2 above me, and then so I was talking to him. I was trying
It's
to
a 3-story.
3 family,
okay, yeah.
and then I was trying to, because I need a plumber to fix some plumbing, and so I asked him for a referral. Anyways, I was talking to him over the phone, and then he's basically said, he was going to these auctions, and he said, he just bought 10. And I knew at these auctions you have to pay cash. And I was just like, wait, you had like 600,000, like, he's like, yeah. I'm like, he was a lawyer, and I couldn't comprehend that, coming from my parents who had nothing, like somebody had that much money. I was just like, that, you see things you see on TV, right? But it's not real until you meet somebody.
Yeah.
And I think that was the first moment where I was like, oh, this guy, like there's people out there that actually have $1 million that you come across. I don't know why I realized that at such a late age. I think before that, I just, only worked in corporate and I didn't, think of any of this stuff. So then after that, just kept on going, kept on refinancing it.
So that kind of inspired you or kind of showed you that it's possible.
It showed me, yeah. And there was another situation that showed me the same thing too. So one of the things that I think also entrepreneurs should do is they need to be optimistic and they have to get out of their comfort zone. So I remember one time I was already buying in. This is like skipping.
Yeah.
I was already investing in Rhode Island, right? And I knew that there was a train station coming in, a new train station. So I was like, okay, maybe I should invest near the train station. So I went over there and I went to the visitor center. And I was like, hey, where's the train station? I want to go drive by it. And the lady that was working there is like, oh, I don't know. She's like, let me call my boss, who's, anyways, he's kind of like head of tourism or whatever in the whole city. And he said, I don't know. I was like, how do you not know? Like you basically know everything that's going on in the city.
Yeah, it's a train station.
It's a train station.
It's not like a
This
small
is like
thing.
at the very beginning when they first announced that it was going to happen. So they didn't start building or anything. And then he said, well, there's a guy that knows, he's a real estate investor and he owns the whole city. I was like, somebody that owns like the whole city, like doesn't make, and he's like, yeah, I just had lunch with him and he's Chinese. I was like, there's no Chinese people in Rhode Island. First of all, I don't see many. And so he calls him up and then this older guy, he's the same age as my dad. He comes in and he speaks Cantonese. So I'm like trying with my broken Cantonese to talk to him. And then I was like, yeah, I'm wondering where the train station is. And he's like, come on, I'll go show you. So I jump in his Mercedes S-Class, white with the beige interior. And I just remember that. I was just like, okay, this is what, like this first time I met somebody, in person that was rich and he was Chinese, right? Like, so I'm like, all the Chinese people, all my parents, like, none of them are like this. So we go drive around, he shows me the train station and then he, I think he's kind of a little bit more comfortable with me now. And he's like, oh, we're driving down one street. And he's like, oh, I own this, I own that, I own that, own that. I was blown away because they were the biggest buildings and they were the nicest buildings in that city. And then I said, oh, there's one building that I saw earlier when I was driving by and it was empty. It was a really nice building. Why isn't that thing, like who owns that? So I own that too. And so he's like, oh, if you want it, I'll sell it to you. I was like, really? I was like, yeah, let's do it. So he's like, so I got his email. And then, so I think a couple of days later, I emailed him. No response.
You didn't have any second thoughts like, why is he selling this to me if it's a good asset for him?
No.
No.
Well, I did think, okay, why is this building vacant? Why isn't he renovating such a nice building?
Yeah.
And I think partially, construction cost is high, values were low, especially at that time too. And it was maybe a little bit on the smaller end for him. He was focusing on bigger
Did you ask
projects.
him why he was selling it?
He wasn't selling it. It wasn't on the market.
Oh, okay.
He just owned it and he just kept it.
He just wanted to sell it to you.
He would only, because he would only sell to me, I think. I don't know, but it's not on the market, unless somebody approached him.
Yeah.
And so I email him and no response. And then I think, so I was like, okay, forget it. Maybe, like he's just too busy. He was flaking me out, whatever. But I think, the part where I was like, okay, get out of your comfort zone, and, you have to put in a little bit of extra effort instead of just, so I went and I called him, and then he picked up and I was like, oh, hey, and he's like, yeah, I remember you. And I was like, oh, you didn't respond to my email. He's like, oh, what email? The guy's in his 60s. Like, he doesn't care about emails. He doesn't check them. He probably rarely checks them.
He's probably really successful. He doesn't
he does phone calls.
Track,
when I text him, sometimes he responds, sometimes he don't. If I call him, he calls. He picks up, or he calls me back. He's just old school like that. So then we started hanging out, meeting up for lunch, and I bought 2 buildings from him. One of them is that mill, and it wasn't successful. I don't think it's because of the building. I think the values, obviously, bad contractors. So, but that moment was kind of like for me of seeing what's possible and just kind of, he's like my Dailo, right? Like somebody that I can relate to.
Because he's Chinese.
He's also Chinese,
and
right?
Cantonese.
He's Cantonese. He came here, I think, in his 20s, late 20s, and didn't speak English, and he built his empire.
Do you think if you didn't meet this guy, the Dorchester guy, and then see what was possible, do you think you could be successful?
I think I still would, but I think that they kind of put things in perspective a little bit of just seeing how it is, because before that I have no idea what it looks like. I'm just putting my head down and just go.
Right.
And then now I'm like, okay, so that's what it looks like if I keep on going.
So would you say like you almost bought those buildings just to have more interaction with him?
No, I think I did wanted to do them. I did wanted to do the project. I did wanted to do the project.
I'm just wondering if having all those meals with him and gathering his insight, like how valuable was that for you?
I think it was more. It wasn't like, okay, he, like in the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, the rich dad like told him exactly what to do, kind of, or taught him a lot of lessons. It wasn't like that. It was more of, I just kind of. It was maybe a little bit more of a motivation, because at this point, this was probably 6 years ago. At this point, I already know everything. Like that's the thing with real estate. This is not complicated. So I already know, for the most part, everything there is to know about real estate. It's not that complicated, but it's actually putting yourself out there and actually doing it. There's a lot of people that don't even own any real estate, and I bet you they know, 90% of what I know. It's not that complicated, but actually doing it, and then, when you're seeing somebody that did it and where they are now, it's kind of like, okay, I can do that too. So I think that was,
So it's not the knowledge that's important in real estate, it's the execution.
I think if you have the basic knowledge, actually, here's another thing. I think too much knowledge is bad. So when I used to go to networking events, they would always be like, oh, okay, you got to make sure you have an inspection. You make sure you have an environmental report or something. And so I'm getting worried, like, oh, wait, that house, it was a foreclosure. Like, I'm going to gut it anyways. I didn't do an inspection. So I'm getting scared, like, oh, is there foundation issues? Is there mold issues? So people that go to these events and, it's analysis paralysis, right?
Right.
They're so scared. Now they're getting more scared, and they're like, okay, this could happen. What if this happens? They don't do it. Whereas in the beginning, I was just like, oh, this condo's $60,000. It rents for $1,500. There's already a tenant there. Like, no brainer. Just buy it. I didn't even ask any questions. And you have to kind of almost don't overanalyze it. Step back and kind of like, I do a lot of like, they call it paper napkin calculations. I already know within like 20 seconds whether I'm most likely going to buy a property or not. So if somebody was like, oh, hey, there's this property, there's this many units or whatever, this is where it is, this is how much the price is, I'm like, oh, that's a good, I can already know right away whether that's a good deal or not. And
It's like the 80-20 rule.
yes,
Yeah.
so
If 80% is good, then it's fine.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the other 20%.
I live by the 80-20 rule because I feel like, in the beginning you have to do everything. Like in the beginning I managed the properties myself. I even fixed some toilets myself. I was up till midnight in Dorchester painting just to get it ready for the tenants the next day. But eventually you want to look at it from like a higher level. Is it worth your time to be doing all those things?
Right.
When you can, if I hired a contractor, if I hired a property manager, you have to do everything, most of it yourself because you're trying to save on costs, right? So, I was managing properties myself, I was renovating them, I was fixing toilets, painting, and then when it got a little bit bigger, that's when I was like, okay, this is not worth my time. And I hired a lot of it out. I hired contractors, I hired property managers, and that allowed me to do more deals. So I would, instead of doing one, I can do maybe 3, 4, or 5. And I would refinance any properties I had if it went up in value, because I renovated and it appreciated. So I refinance, use that to buy more properties, or sometimes I just sold it to get more cash so I can keep on doing more deals.
When did this shift happen? Like what year?
It was when I started selling all those Dorchester condos. So this was in, I don't know, maybe 2016, I had to guess, somewhere around there.
So you were doing everything yourself between 2009 and 2016, the
Yeah.
first 7 years. Yeah. How many units did you have at that time?
That's 7
7
in
units.
Dorchester, yeah. And I was, from maybe 2012 to 2016, I was also flipping houses. So I was flipping single families because there's so many foreclosures and so many deals. And so I was getting bank loans to flip houses. And then I was like, okay, prices gone up. I didn't know it was gonna go up like this, but at that point I thought it was high. So I sold them, and I also wanted more cash flow because I was like, okay, I'm just constantly, just renovating houses, selling it, and paying self-employment tax, because now you're considered a developer when you're flipping. So I'm like, okay, let me get more passive income so I can just, buy some cheaper properties like in Rhode Island where the rents are decent, and I can kind of like, okay, sit back a little bit. So I went down Rhode Island. It was so cheap down there. It was like $30,000, $40,000 a unit.
Wow.
So I bought a bunch. I think I got up to like 50 at one point.
50 units.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I rented it, and I was just like, the income is still not that good because some of the units I'll fix it, some I won't, but it was just constant upkeep. It'll be like, oh, okay, oh yeah, the rent is great, but then after you pay your taxes, insurance, your mortgage, and then, oh, the roof went out, you gotta replace it. Oh, the heating system went out. Oh, the tenant broke the appliances. Oh, the tenant moved out and they trashed the place. And then I'll buy a new property, and of course, to get a good deal, you want to find one that needs work. So I'm like, okay, all the money I made, I gotta put it in to that one to fix it. So I'm just like, oh, there's nothing left. And at this point, prices went up. So I sold those, and I went and then I was like, okay, let me buy commercial buildings, because I hear commercial buildings, it's low maintenance, the tenant takes care of the interior, and you're just responsible for parking lot and roof. So I got into commercial, and then I found headaches there too. And it just seems like I'm constantly just.
Was this the daycare?
So yeah, daycare. I also bought a little like small neighborhood shopping center. What else did I buy? I think mainly just those two. And then now recently I bought some medical condos. But it never it's never as passive as you think. But so then now I'm doing, hard money lending, which actually is as passive as I thought. But, the returns are not as good. Because now you're the bank and you're not getting the upside. You're just getting a fixed rate. But I think, especially with the market where it is right now, it's hard to find deals. So I'm comfortable just lending it out.
So with the 80-20 rule, where you said you don't do inspections, you just kind of do things quickly.
Those properties, you have to. It's like a foreclosure, so you can look at it yourself, but there's no time to like hire an inspector.
But basically, you're looking for the 80%. So
and so when I'm renovating them, also I'm not a perfectionist, so I'm not trying to get everything perfect. Of course, we want everything to, all the plumbing, electrical, heating system, all that to work. But I'm not going and designing it like it's going to be my house.
Right.
And so I'm spending time, doing it, but I'm still having contractors fixing it. So it's not requiring me that much time. So it allows me time to do other things, do more projects. That's how I was able to do it without any employees. I don't have a single employee. I don't have many investors. And that's the other thing is when you have investors, now you're getting calls from the investors. Oh, what going on with this property? And you don't have that flexibility. When you have partners, you have partners. So you don't have that flexibility. Whereas now I'm not getting any calls. I'm just, I make the decision myself. And, like with this house, a lot of the finishes I have to ask my wife. And that delays, and that goes over budget, right? Whereas when I'm doing it myself, if I'm on the job site and the contractor asks me a question, I don't need to check with anybody. I just decide right there, or I'll be like, oh, I'm gonna go Home Depot right now and I'll get it for you. I'll be back in half an hour. Boom, done.
Do you think, because you had some challenges, right, with the mill, with this house, the daycare.
They were all mainly construction challenges, I feel like. Well, the daycare is a tenant challenge.
But do you ever regret not being careful, or do you feel like this is the issue that people have, is that they're too careful, and sometimes there's always going to be issues, so you might as well just deal with it and continue and keep growing? Because even the mill, right? You made a good amount of money from the mill, right? Not as much as you wanted.
I still ended up making a small little profit, but I think it's because you want to focus on the big picture. So all these properties, I bought it right. Like I bought them at a discount, or like I knew that there's a lot of room for profit.
Even if there's issues.
So even when there's issues, because I bought either a good deal or I put in a lot of work into it to increase the value, that there's so much buffer that, it's really hard to lose money in real estate, especially at the current trend.
Right. But you said entrepreneurs need to be optimistic, right? But you're in a way also being cynical in saying, what's the worst case scenario? I'm building that budget, which I think is kind of unique, right? To be able to be optimistic and cynical. It's kind of what you need in entrepreneurship.
You do want to be optimistic, because you can't be like, oh, what if this happens, and then you don't end up doing anything. You have to look at it overall picture. Okay, this is a good deal. So of course I can get hit by a bus, but whatever you think is going to happen, if it catches on fire, it's very rare, and most likely it should go well. So then I'm like, okay, I don't put any more thought into it. I just buy it. And then you have to be a little bit cynical, because of course you have to, if something is too risky, then you're like, okay, well, this is not a good deal. And there were times where I remember I met another developer, and so I was having all these contract issues, and she was doing a lot of projects, and she had one contract. She's like, oh, her contractor is great, and she don't need to, like, she never goes to the properties. Like, he just takes care of everything. I was like, really? Like, I've met so many contractors, and I never see that happen. So I found the next deal, and I asked her, I was like, okay, hey, let's partner up and let's use your contractor. So we did. Contract that didn't do anything for 6 months. I mean, they demoed it and that was it. And I was there almost every day. I would check, and of course she never goes there. And I'm like, what's going on? And she, she's like, oh, this actually happens, pretty often. Like things just take a long time, and so I'm like, this is not normal. This is, like, the longer it takes, you're paying the mortgage, and like you're gonna end up losing money.
Yeah.
So I rather get it done fast and have it good. It doesn't have to be perfect, but of course we want to make sure all the systems, all that stuff is good. But like, okay, whether has to be some specific paint color, you just want to go neutral and and get it done quick. But that was a situation where I was very optimistic and maybe a little gullible and just kind of believed what people said.
Right. But that sounds like that was her reality, right? Because it seemed like that guy did it to her often.
Yeah.
And that's normal for her.
Yeah, but the fact that she said that he's great and he does such a good job, and I believed it.
Was that her standard of greatness though, Or?
I think her standard of a good contractor is one that doesn't call her, whether they finish on time or not. For me, my standard of a good contractor is one that does a good job and stays on budget and within time. Right?
Yeah.
But if I was the type to be like, oh, so in that situation, I should have been a little bit more careful. I shouldn't have jumped right in, right? I should have been like, oh, let me see. I did go see some of her projects, but I should have looked up, okay, when did she start all these projects? When did they finish? Like go into a little more detail. But when I say about the 80-20 rule and being optimistic, and sometimes you have to get out of your comfort zone. And so let me give you another example. And I started to tell you this story the other day. So I met a guy at a networking event, and same thing. He's like, "Oh,
is this the Ghana?
No,
not the African prince story."
No. So this guy, I met him, and he's like, "Oh, he knows everybody in the city. He can get all these projects approved. He's a big developer, like all this." I was like, "Okay, great. Whatever. I don't know." So I call him a week later, just to check in, and I was like, oh, hey, how's it going? Do you want to, grab coffee sometime? So he's like, yeah. So we grabbed coffee, and I was like, oh, what are you working on? He's like, oh, he's about to buy this land deal in Dorchester. I was like, oh, I own properties in Dorchester. I know, that's the area that I invest in. And he's like, oh, it was a big lot. I think it was like 20,000 square feet, which for Dorchester is really big. So, and he's like, oh, somebody's selling it to him for 100,000. I was like, no way, no way it's that cheap.
Yeah.
So he said he already had a partner, one of his friend, he was going to partner with his friend. I was like, oh, well, that's a great deal. If something happens, just let me know. So he calls me the next day, and he's like, oh, I didn't ask my partner, but because you showed interest, let's partner together on it. So I was like, okay. And then, remember, this guy, I just met him once. I don't know him. And then he said, okay, but you have to put up all the money, and we're 50-50 on a title. I was like, wait. Why am I putting all the money? Why don't you have half? Do you have something?
Yeah.
And how about I be in the title, and we have some side agreement or something, some contract. And he's like, no, he's been burned before when he did that. And so I'm just like, oh, like this seems like a really good deal. And he says he's going to get it approved for 18 units, and we're going to sell it and do well on it. So I was like, okay, what? I'm going to take the chance. And this is where I take more risk than the average person, I think. So we did it, And then he's like, okay, he's gonna go. We bought it. She's like, okay, he's gonna go and get it approved. And he's like, oh, it's gonna take 6 months to a year. I'm like, okay, great. So I check in on him occasionally, and then so I think around like 9 months later, I was like, what's going on? Like, are we getting? When's the hearing? And he turns out he did not have any money to pay the engineers, to pay the surveyors. So he didn't. He told me he's talking to them and he knows all of them, but he hadn't paid them, so they're not going to draw up anything, right? And I'm like, what is going on? So I gave him a little bit more time, but I think probably around a year later, I was like, okay, I'm fed up. Like, there's a year in, you told me we wouldn't be done by now, and you haven't done anything. And I'm like, do I take legal action and force him to sell? So I started calling everybody I know to try to sell it off market. And
Did you actually own the piece of land?
Yes, we owned it together. Okay. We opened the LLC, we owned it together. So he was like, so I called everybody, so many brokers, and they were like, oh, I think we have somebody that will maybe buy it for 400. We paid 100 for it. He spent, at this time, he spent some money, like 20, 30 grand on engineers. I'm like, hey, we can do really well on this. Let's sell it if I can get a buyer. And he's like, no, like, we're gonna make more than that. I'm gonna get approved for 18. And he was like, but if you really, really, really want to, maybe, kind of attitude. So this is a decision that I run into a lot, and I call it, there's a saying, right? You want bird in hand or two in the bush. Yeah. You heard this before?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
So chances are we can probably sell it for, let's say, 300, 400, somewhere around there. And that's a bird in hand.
Yeah.
And it's a great return.
Yeah.
Or do you want to take the chance on him and hope that he does what he says he would do and maybe sell for a little bit more? So I contemplated.
A lot more, right? 18 units?
But it's just Dorchester, though. It's a bad part, and it was on a hill, so it's really hard to build. I had somebody that said they would pay, I think, $650 or $7 if we had it approved for 18. So I was like, okay, do I wait? And so I decided, okay, you know what? It's 100. Like, I don't need it right now. I already waited, a year and a half. I think at this point, let's just wait a little bit longer. And obviously we don't have any debt on it. We just had like small property tax bill, and that was it. No, there's no utility costs or anything, right? It's just a piece of land. And then, long story short, he actually got it approved.
Wow.
And we sold it for almost $1 million.
Wow.
Just under.
Oh man, I'm so glad. I was gonna laugh at you when you first started telling the story. I was like, man, you got burned, man. And then, holy cow.
So the point of the story is that, like, you have to take chances. You have to be optimistic. And of course you gotta do due diligence. Of course, don't get scammed, which, or trust everybody. But once in a while you have to do things like this, where you have to get out there and you have to meet new people. You have to get out of your comfort zone, or else nothing will happen.
What percentage of that was your that 100,000 of your portfolio at that time?
I don't know.
Small?
Not small. It wasn't small. Yeah, I'm not sure.
It wasn't like a throwaway money.
No, of course not.
I mean,
still not. Yeah, it was very significant. But I think it was. I didn't need it to live. I could wait.
Yeah.
So that was maybe about like 7 years ago.
Was that your biggest win in real estate?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I mean, sometimes you have to get out of your comfort zone and do some of these things.
What other stories you have like that?
Let me think.
What was your biggest loss?
I haven't had that many losses. Like, to me, the mill was a loss, even though I made money. Like, to me, but as far as like dollar wise, one time I did a loan and I think I was too eager to do the loan. And anyways, the guy, he couldn't pay me, and so I had to foreclose. But this is during the pandemic, so even though it's a commercial loan, which foreclosure should be instant, because of the pandemic, everything was shut down, and I think it took me like, maybe 9 months or so to foreclose. And then when I did, there was a tenant there, and she was like, well, it's pandemic, I don't need to pay you rent. So she didn't pay me rent, and I couldn't evict her. So she didn't lose her job or anything. She was still making money, and she was just like, well, I don't need to go. And so if I waited and evicted her and then renovate and sell it, I probably would have made a little bit. But I was just so tired of that whole situation that I just sold at a loss. I lost like 40 on that. That was,
So do you feel like you're lucky, or like do most people you know in real estate not ever lose money, or? I think sometimes they have projects where they lose a little bit, but because the market is doing, I mean, I don't know all the details too, and I don't ask that much. But I think generally the people that I know in real estate, they're not that active. There are some that are, but majority of them are just not that active, or they'll do 1 or 2 deals and then they stop. Whether they couldn't deal with the construction, or they didn't want to take any more risk, they didn't want to get all these, all the loans. But the way I view it is, if you, let's say it's flipping or investing, and anything to do with investing, if you can get a return greater than what you're borrowing it at from the bank, which at that time it was like 4 or 5%. Let's say if you can get a return greater than that, then you should do it for the risk. Right? I think real estate is pretty, low risk. So if you can get a return over 10%, let's say, I think you should do it. But a lot of people just like, oh, I don't want debt. I don't want debt on my house. I want to pay down my mortgage. But you can borrow at 5% and you can earn 10, 15. Why not? Like it's a simple formula. And so I treat investing just like that. Like, don't get emotional. It's math. Like if the numbers work, just do it. There's nothing else to think about. So what are you working on now?
So I have the restaurant, which shirt you wearing?
Yeah, Soul Kitchen.
Soul Kitchen. I'm doing hard money lending. I have a few investment properties, not many left, and invest in some syndicators too. So it's all pretty passive. I don't have any construction projects right now, which is, I think it's like the first time in like 14 years that I don't have a project going on.
Do you still have the fire in you to?
I think I do, but I have to partner up with a good contractor this time. Like I'm not. And
that's where you've gotten burned the most. On the contractor side.
And I think also just with the market the way it is. But I think
the market, as in
the real estate market, it's just not. It's not a good time.
Not a lot of good value.
I mean, you can. It might be coming down a little bit, and you might be able to find some deals where the seller's really motivated. But generally, even if you can get a good deal, but you're borrowing it. My bank for construction is charging me like 9.5%, whereas it used to be like 5.5%. Like 9.5%, and what if it goes? If the project's delayed, which it always is delayed, or if it goes over budget, which it always goes over budget. Like now, that added risk, with that interest rate, you gotta have a higher anticipated return to make up for that. But the real estate prices hasn't gone down, so there is no, higher return.
So the general economic conditions are making you pull back a little bit.
Correct, and also just tired of construction. Now looking maybe at investing some small businesses. We'll see. I mean, I think that has its own challenges too. Like with operating, finding a good operator is going to be an issue. Also, when a new owner comes in, clients might leave. I think that's a concern. So, but with any investing, you kind of have to just look at the risk and the reward, right?
Would you say you've kind of moved on from being an operator in real estate and more of an investor in real estate and general business?
Yeah, I mean, I think, with this house, we did hire a contractor, but I was still here every day. I think it's just, when you're investing, you kind of want to see it, you want to control it as much as you can. You want to make sure things are getting done. So I think even though I'm going to try to be more passive, not be the operator, I'm still going to be there. Like, probably check up on it.
It's still in you.
Yeah.
But not as much.
Yeah, because always concerned, like, oh, what if they're not doing their job, or
So, what do you think? The Jason living in the $150 a month room would say if he met you today?
I don't know. I don't think he's. I don't know. I never thought of that. I think he wouldn't believe it. But I think looking back at that, I think I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I think I wouldn't say anything to that person, because if I do, now they're gonna overanalyze, right? Overthink, and a lot of times you need to just grind, just work hard, and work smart, right? Don't just run around like a hamster on a wheel, right?
Yeah.
I think another part of working smart is that sometimes when I say you have to sit back and you have to look at your business from like a bigger picture, is that, I always talk about how, lowering expenses, right? What's the biggest expense? A lot of people think, oh, it's their house, their mortgage, or their rents, or it's their car payment, or there's food. But I think the biggest expense people have is their taxes. So sometimes you need to sit back and be like, okay, what can I do with my business to save on these costs?
Yeah, you're absolutely right on the taxes part.
Because people are just like, oh, okay, let me not go out to eat so I can save this money. But that's minimal compared to how much you're paying tax. So, I realized that, and that's why I did, I wouldn't say I'm a real estate investor. Like, I'm an investor, but I happen to invest in real estate because I think for, the low risk, decent returns, and tax savings.
Yeah.
So that's why I slowed down on doing, flipping houses, or because when you're buying rental properties, there's depreciation, there's all this, there's 1031 exchange, where that is a big savings, and especially in that beginning when you want to save as much as you can to reinvest it and have it grow, because every little bit counts in the beginning.
So when you're moving every 2 years, that was a huge savings for you.
Yeah, that was big too, because we didn't have to pay any capital gains tax on that, and that wasn't even, because when you think about it, how hard is it to move? Like, for example, my wife, she don't want to move, and most people don't.
She doesn't want to move now, but does she appreciate everything that you went through?
I think so. She never said it. But maybe
she never said it?
No, I think she definitely does. But I think a lot of people, they're so comfortable, with where they're at. They don't want to move, and sometimes family and friends, I tell them like, oh, if you sell it, you're gonna make good money, and they're like, well, where am I gonna go? Now I gotta find a new place, and I'm like, well, you find a fixer upper, and they're like, no, I don't want to deal with that. That's too much work. That's too much headache. And I'm like, well, you're working 40 hours a week, 100 days or 300 something days a year to make, let's say, 6 figures, when you could do that just by selling your house, like, and move and hire a mover. It's going to cost you, $2,000.
Right.
But that's the bigger picture. It's like, if you get a little bit uncomfortable by moving, obviously it depends on the situation, but that's just an example that you could, and then you do that every 2-3 years.
True, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, let's say your house only went up a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you went and you found a fixer-upper and then, keep on going, like, so.
Sometimes it's not all about the money,
Yes, so that's
There's the comfort, right?
Yes, there's that comfort. So
And
a lot
as
of
you
people,
get more and more money,
Yep. So a
the
lot of
comfort's
people
more valuable
value,
too.
correct. A lot of people value the comfort, and
But you're at that point now too, right?
yes. But I think in
You
the
wouldn't
beginning,
live in an unheated room right now, right?
No.
You don't want to do
Yeah.
construction, right? So
but I think in the beginning, a lot of people, you have to get
have
out
to
of
do
your
that in the
comfort
beginning,
zone.
yeah.
You have to get out of your comfort zone, and once you do that, actually, and you kind of see it growing, you kind of get a little addicted to it. And because I remember even when I sold those condos in Dorchester, and I was like, okay, should I go and buy a new car or go on a vacation? But I was just like, okay, if I reinvest all of it and not spend any of it, it's going to grow even faster because it's already grown.
yeah,
So you always it's all delayed gratification, right? You have to delay it until you get to a point where you're like, okay, now. But I think a lot of people, they don't delay it enough.
or they can't live through the uncomfort.
Yeah. But if they just do it for a little bit, it's so much more rewarding at that.
Yeah. I think entrepreneurs are good at being uncomfortable.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 And I think entrepreneurs, they are, but I think there's also a lot of entrepreneurs that they are constantly thinking about starting a business, but they don't take the action.
Yeah.
And what do you think? Why don't they do that?
Why they don't?
Yeah.
I think either you have it in you or you don't, And some people, to be honest, just don't have it in them. Yeah. It's a different kind of mentality. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that deep. Either you do it or you don't.
Yeah.
And that dictates the rest of your life. Yeah.
But I think also, when you're doing it, they're worried about the risk, right? They're scared of quitting their job and, take on this risky thing. But, when I did it, I was doing both at the same time until I knew that there wasn't really any risk if I went full time.
That's what I did too. Yeah.
Yeah. You did that too?
Yeah.
You were doing
I
chicken rice at the
was
same time?
doing for a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Oh.
When we first started, I was working and running the truck at the same time.
For weeks? I did for like 4 years.
No, I didn't do it for that long. I quit pretty soon because I wasn't making that much money, and I knew I could make more money on the truck.
Yeah.
And it's the same kind of risk.
Correct.
Yeah. So you started this journey 20 years ago, right? Almost.
No.
We started saving in 2002.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
What do you think the next 20 years is going to be like for you? You're going to go from Newton to Beverly Hills?
No, I don't think so. I think, I don't know. I'm always kind of, I talk to you about this, is like, okay, I know I can do more, but do I want to do more? And is it worth the stress of trying to do more? And so I'm trying to find that balance of, because if I don't do more, if I just, sit back and smoke cigars and drink whiskey with Chuck every single day, I feel empty.
Yeah.
Like I still to this day just look at properties for fun until like midnight.
You had a great point where you're just doing things for fun.
Yeah, so
That's how I feel. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm there, or I'm almost there, where I can just, if I like to do it, then I do it, not because I have to do it. And so that's why I want to focus on. But I also enjoy the growth. If something is too easy and there's no growth in it, then I might be like, I don't feel challenged.
Seeing things grow is very rewarding.
Yeah.
I'm sure with your kids is the same way. Even you talked about your grass,
Oh yeah, my grass when it grows, I'm happy.
They're saying like old people should have plants because it
Yeah.
actually makes them happy. It increases like their happiness and everything. I totally agree with that,
Yeah.
And that's what I love about business, seeing business grow.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why I want to try to do that. Take on projects that I enjoy. Without taking on things I don't enjoy. Even if it means it's going to do better.
Nice. I know you wrote 3 pages of notes. Is there anything we missed from those notes?
Look at my notes.
You want to grab it?
Yeah, sure.
What's your notes? I don't want to ruin any great material you came up with.
You gonna edit this out?
Yeah, we'll see. Let's do a tour later of your house too. Jason was prepared.
No, I think I just when I'm driving, there's things that pop up in my mind.
Yeah. Where it says speech, were you gonna just give a speech the whole time?
No, I had to title it some way. I think I actually talked about most of this.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for preparing. All right.
Yeah.
Let's wrap it up. Thanks, Jason. Any last words? Any on advice on investing, being an entrepreneur, being successful?
Save your money. Invest all of it. When I say invest all, I really don't keep, like, a lot of times people are like, oh, you should keep 6 months of reserves. Like, that's what credit cards are for. And most of the time, nothing's gonna happen. Like, most of the time, you are gonna get that check next month. So I keep 1 month of reserve. That's it.
Even with 2 kids?
Yeah.
Wow.
I just, because I mean, you have insurance, right? And if some bill unexpectedly comes up, charge it with your credit card. But this is that compound interest thing. If you keeping cash in the bank, it's just dying.
Yeah.
You have to invest all of it because all that, like, even though it's not much in the beginning, it's going to be worth a lot more in the future.